Welcome to the 9th chapter of Raising Rebecca Books, the birth of a publishing house. This is the audio story of me, Rebecca Seitz, building a traditional, royalty-paying publishing house from the ground up, told to you as it unfolds. It has been over 2 months since I brought you an update. Now, there are 3 main reasons for that wide swath of time passing in between episodes. First, as you know, Rebecca Books is the publishing division of my company, the 1C Story Network. Well, within the network is an audio and film division called 1C Productions. In these past 2 months, 1C Productions has launched 1 new podcast show and developed another that launches in June. Those shows took and continue to take a lot of time, and only one of them was planned for. The show that launched May 3rd is called Right to Life, and I encourage you to check it out at righttolifestories.com. The other is called Teacup Talks and is slated for initial release later in June. The other 2 reasons for the delay between episodes are due to Rebecca Books itself.
You're listening to Raising Rebecca Books, the birth of a publishing house on the 1C Story Network. 1C is made possible in part by the support of the following sponsor.
To publish books, a publishing house first has to acquire the rights to intellectual property. And this is reason number 2 that all's been silent on the podcast front. See, early on, the writers and the projects for the first cohort of Rebecca Books titles were identified. These authors and I have been talking for months developing their projects. They have been hard at work writing. At the same time, a team of people has been working on development of the Rebecca Books publishing contract. Now, I don't think I've spoken to my corporate attorney as much in the decade I've worked with him as I have this year on the topic of contracts. Because I am both a traditionally published author and someone who has worked with numerous traditional publishing houses, I happen to have a lot of their contracts, or at least knowledge of them, at my fingertips. I know firsthand what it's like to be a traditionally published author at a major publishing house. And I've been a part of the teams inside publishing houses when they're deciding whether to acquire projects and figuring out how to negotiate those contracts. At Rebecca Books, I have had one singular guiding force for our contract template. Take care of the author, but don't require the author to be more than the author. Now, what does that mean in practicality? Well, first you have to think about all the ways that the intellectual property of a book can be monetized. In book form, there are numerous foreign language rights, audio rights, special editions for book clubs or specific retailers, large print, those are just a few. Then there are ways that the book's content can be exploited into other media. Films, streaming television series, and audio dramatic series are the ones that usually come to mind first. Those versions of the book's content involve players like studios and writers and contracts that aren't privy to that initial book publishing contract. And that's why, more often than not, it is in those exploitations of the book rights that authors get cut out. I mean, they'll get their percentage of whatever flat fee the publisher gets. Say, the publisher sells film rights for $100,000 and then splits that half and half between the publisher and the author. But after that, the author is done. A movie gets made, makes millions of dollars, and people assume that the author is now richity rich, and yet all the author ever saw was half of that initial licensing fee that the publisher got, and hopefully a bump in their book sales when the movie comes out. Now, this is not the case all the time. Nothing in the entertainment business is ever the case all the time. Bigger name authors, or ones that have agents or managers who are quite savvy and possess persuasive power in the business, can sometimes negotiate better deals to stay included in the profit stream of whatever gets made off their work. But in the majority of instances, authors of the source material, the book, are not getting percentages of whatever that secondary product, the film, the streaming series, or what have you, makes. And I wanted to see if we could fix that contractually for Rebecca Books authors while simultaneously avoiding the outcome of rendering Rebecca Books titles unattractive to those who would flip them into other kinds of media. And that verbiage took a while to craft, but in the end, we did it. Another part of our contracts was paying the authors well for the sale of their books. Yes, the publishing house does have the biggest financial gamble at the start, because we are covering the considerable costs of turning that manuscript into a book in the hands of a reader. That requires tens of thousands of dollars. And that's the argument that is used to justify publishing houses keeping 85 to 90% of the revenue that those book sales generate. But that number, it simply seemed too high to me. It's why the majority of traditionally published authors don't even earn enough to break the poverty line with their book earnings. They have to hold down additional jobs or have other ways to meet their bills while still protecting and nurturing their ability to write. As someone who has lived this way for all of her career, I do not think it serves the world or writers well to hamper their ability to be full-time writers. Would you ask your doctor to also bag groceries or drive Uber to be able to afford being your doctor? How about your dentist or your attorney? Writing requires both learned skill and nurturing of inherent ability. It blossoms beautifully, thereby serving everyone well, when it is given the space, time, and attention to flourish. I want Rebecca Books to help make full-time book writing a truly possible career choice. The solution we arrived at was to not only raise our royalty rates higher than the industry standard so that authors make more per book sold here than they would at other traditional houses, but also to pull out a chair for authors at the larger corporate profit table. See, at Rebecca Books, a percentage of corporate profit is allocated each year to the author pool. That pool consists of authors whose books released that year. And as the years progress, it will include authors whose backlist titles meet a certain sales threshold in that year as well. So let's say we publish 12 authors in a year. A percentage of corporate profit at the end of that year is distributed equally to each of those authors, in addition to the royalties that they made from their own specific books' sales. Another way we increased profit for the author was to provide Speakers Bureau services. I had this in my previous company, Glass Road, so it was easy enough to build out the same thing here at 1C. We create all the pitch collateral, we contact event organizers to arrange speaking engagements, handle all the logistics of the author and the books actually being there. We negotiate the contracts, we manage the return of whatever product doesn't sell. Basically, we take care of all the details so that our author only has to show up, speak or perform, and get back to writing. We keep a small percentage of the speaker's fees that we negotiate for them. The rest goes to the author. And since we're the publisher, we don't have to charge a percentage of product sales on top of that. The publisher is already making money off of those product sales. Everything I just told you had to be written into our contracts. Now listen, have you ever worked on a contract with a legal team? Good heavens, the placement of a comma, semicolon, or a period can entirely change the implementation of words. We worked so hard to describe those higher royalty rates, the corporate profit participation schedule and rates, and the Speakers Bureau services and processes. It has taken an enormous amount of time, let me tell you. I want to pause here and give massive kudos to our main corporate attorney for the time he spent on not just getting the language right, but first taking the time to understand how and why we wanted our contracts to function differently than typical traditional publishing contracts. Here, care of the author is primary. We literally finalized the version of our contract in the final half of May. Yeah, it took that long. And now, that contract is sitting in our author's hands. Which leads me to the third reason for the distance between episodes here. The first gathering of Rebecca Books authors is happening on Wednesday, June 5th. Now, I want to say here at the top of this item that I'm a little nervous. I mean, that's a lot of power and ability being gathered into one room. The women of Rebecca Books are each stunning and incredible in her own right. They're wise, talented, accomplished, survivors, thrivers. They are present, inquisitive and insightful, brave and welcoming, knowledgeable and yet curious. They are walking billboards for the spectacular magic that happens when a woman comes into her own. One woman living within the fully embodied nature of herself is a sight to behold. A room of them? Yeah, I'm a touch nervous. But I'm also giddy with anticipation because these women, they don't know each other right now. I'm the only one who knows all of them. They all came to me through different avenues. So when we gather in person for the first time on June 5th, literally anything can happen. We'll be walking through a lot of corporate information that day, including contract review as a group. But I know, as I sit here talking to you, that what unfolds on June 5th isn't fully known by me right now. And I am so excited about that. So that's where we are with Rebecca Books. Our first line is still slated for spring 2025. Documents and data have to be in our sales team's hands by July 1 of this year. We've got a crazy busy month ahead to hit that deadline. But hit it we will. And I'll be back here as soon as I can with an update. For now, I'm Rebecca Seitz. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me.
You've been listening to Raising Rebecca Books, the birth of a publishing house from the 1C Story Network. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and learn more at RebecaBooks.com. That's REBECA books.com.
The 1C Story Network, for the love of stories.